In the heart of a long-forgotten town, surrounded by overgrown weeds and withering trees, stood the Hollow House. It was an ancient mansion, its darkened windows and creaking gates suggesting decades of abandonment. Local lore whispered that anyone who dared to enter would never return, consumed by the house's insatiable hunger for souls. Eli, a curious teenager with a penchant for the supernatural, decided to challenge the myth. One dusky evening, armed only with a flashlight and a camera, he ventured towards the Hollow House. The air grew colder as he approached, and the wind seemed to carry faint whispers, as if the house itself was calling out to him. Upon entering, Eli found the interior remarkably preserved. Dusty portraits lined the walls, their eyes seeming to follow him as he moved. The house was silent, save for the distant sound of a piano playing somewhere deep within. Compelled by an inexplicable force, Eli followed the melody through the twisting corridors. As he drew closer, the music grew louder and more dissonant. Finally, he reached a grand ballroom where an ancient piano sat at the center, its keys moving rapidly with no one at the helm. The room was filled with shadows that swirled and danced as if attending a spectral gala. Eli raised his camera, capturing the ghostly scene, but as the flash fired, the music abruptly stopped, and the shadows turned menacingly toward him. Panicking, Eli ran, the house seemingly rearranging itself to trap him. Doors disappeared, replaced by walls. Windows revealed only brick enclosures. His breaths were heavy, the echo of his footsteps a constant reminder that he was not alone. He could hear whispers now, clear and sinister, speaking in tongues he could not understand. After what felt like an eternity, Eli found himself in a small, dimly lit room that had not been there before. In the center, a dusty mirror stood, its surface murky but glowing faintly. As Eli approached, his reflection began to warp. His image twisted into a horrific version of himself, eyes hollow and skin gaunt. The reflection reached out, its hand pressing against the glass as if to break through. Terrified, Eli backed away, but the room had no doors. The whispers grew louder, turning into harsh, mocking laughter. In desperation, Eli turned the camera on himself, hoping to use the flash to disrupt the haunting. When the light flashed, the mirror shattered, and suddenly, silence fell. Eli found himself outside the house, the front gates looming ominously before him. He stumbled out, never looking back. When he later reviewed the photos, each one was more disturbing than the last, showing scenes and creatures he didn't remember seeing. The last photo taken of the mirror showed not his twisted reflection, but a group of shadowy figures standing right behind where he had been. From that night on, Eli could sometimes hear faint piano music drifting through the air at night, and he knew that the Hollow House had let him leave, but it would never truly release its hold on him. Weeks after his escape, Eli found himself haunted, not just by the eerie piano melodies that whispered on the wind at night, but also by dreams so vivid they felt like memories. In these dreams, he walked endless halls of the Hollow House, each room revealing a deeper layer of its dark heart. Shadows danced just out of sight, their whispers now familiar, a constant murmuring in the background of his waking life. As autumn deepened, the pull of the house grew stronger. Objects in Eli's home began to move of their own accord. Books would fall from shelves, and doors would slam shut, as if an unseen force was inhabiting his space. One chilling night, the piano music swelled so loud that it seemed to come from inside his own room. Driven by a mix of terror and an inexplicable yearning, Eli decided to confront the source of his torment. Armed with a new camera and a digital recorder, he returned to the Hollow House under the light of a full moon. The gates creaked open, as if welcoming him back. Inside, the air was thick with anticipation, the house seeming to breathe with a life of its own. Eli pressed record on his device and began speaking, asking questions into the emptiness. As he ventured deeper, his own voice echoed back at him from the walls, not with answers but with more questions, mimicking him in a taunting tone. When he reached the grand ballroom, the piano played once again, the melody more frantic than before. This time, Eli approached the instrument, his hands trembling as he reached out to touch the ivory keys. The moment he made contact, the music stopped, and a cold gust swept through the room, extinguishing all light. In the pitch darkness, Eli felt the air thicken, and he sensed he was no longer alone. He could hear faint breathing close to his ear, and as he turned his head, a dim light appeared from nowhere, illuminating the piano. There, reflected in the polished wood, was not his own image, but a tableau of the shadowy figures from his last photograph. They were clearer now, each one distinct and grotesquely beautiful in their spectral forms. A whispered invitation floated through the air, seductive and horrifying. "Join us," they murmured, a chorus that swelled in intensity until Eli felt it resonate within his very bones. With trembling hands, he lifted the camera, the flash casting stark light across the room. The figures recoiled, their forms momentarily revealing human features, expressions of sorrow, pain, and longing before they dissolved into the shadows once again. The piano began to play by itself, a soft, melancholic tune that seemed a lament for the lost. Eli left the Hollow House that night with more than just photographs and recordings. He carried with him a burden of knowledge. He knew now that the house was not just a building but a repository of souls, each one trapped in an endless cycle of longing and despair. And every night as the piano whispers through his dreams, he feels the pull of those lost souls, inviting him to become one with the house, to finally understand all its dark secrets. The Hollow House stands still, waiting, its story etched into the very walls that trap both the living and the dead. As the days turned into weeks, Eli's obsession with Hollow House deepened. The spectral piano music that once haunted his nights now filled his days, a constant reminder of the unresolved mysteries of the house. He spent hours reviewing the recordings and photographs, each one revealing layers of whispers and apparitions that he had not noticed in his terror. Driven by a need to understand, and perhaps to free the souls he had seen trapped within the house, Eli began researching its history. He learned that the mansion was once the grand estate of the Hawthorne family, prominent figures in the town's early days, but struck by tragedy when the entire family vanished one night without a trace. The townspeople spoke of a curse, one that began with a forbidden pact made by the patriarch with dark forces, seeking eternal life, but instead binding his family's souls to the mansion. Realizing that the shadows might be the Hawthorne family, Eli felt a new resolve to help them find peace. He gathered a small group of friends who shared his interest in the paranormal and planned a night to perform a ritual intended to release the spirits. Armed with salt, candles, and incantations gleaned from ancient texts, they entered Hollow House under the light of the new moon. As they set up in the grand ballroom, the air grew cold, and the shadows seemed to watch, their presence felt in every corner of the room. Eli and his friends formed a circle, holding hands as they recited the incantations. The candles flickered as if in a breeze, though no wind blew inside the sealed room. The piano keys began to clatter softly, then grew into a frenzied pace as the ritual reached its climax. Suddenly, a violent gust swept through the room, extinguishing the candles and plunging them into darkness. The whispers turned into screams, the air filled with the sounds of a struggle, and then, as suddenly as it had begun, everything stopped. The house was silent, eerily calm, and when Eli lit the candles again, the atmosphere felt lighter, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. Relief washed over the group, but as they prepared to leave, Eli noticed a new photograph on his camera, one he had not taken. It showed the group in the ballroom, performing the ritual, but behind them were the Hawthorne family, visible and serene, their expressions no longer twisted in sorrow or longing. They stood at the edge of the circle, as if bidding farewell. The timestamp on the photograph was from a minute in the future. Heart pounding with a mixture of fear and awe, Eli showed the photograph to his friends. They watched in silent agreement as the time-stamped minute arrived, and the camera automatically captured a new photo. This one showed the room empty, No sign of the Hawthorns or any spectral presence. Convinced that they had freed the spirits, the group left the house, feeling an unspoken bond with each other and the history they had just encountered. As they passed through the gates, a faint melody played like a goodbye, and then faded into the night. Eli never heard the piano music again after that night. Hollow House stood silent and undisturbed, its windows dark, the whispers gone. Yet, for Eli, the house would always be alive in his memories, a reminder of the night he touched another realm and the shadows that danced at the edge of the living world. Months passed, and the Hollow House became a quiet legend once again in the town. Eli's life returned to a semblance of normality, but the house and its mysteries lingered in his thoughts, a haunting backdrop to his everyday routine. People spoke of the night he and his friends supposedly freed the spirits, some with skepticism, others with a wary respect. But as autumn returned, marking a year since his first encounter, Eli found himself drawn back to the house. The air grew crisp and the leaves turned a fiery red, mirroring the pull of something unseen yet palpably present. He couldn't explain why, but he felt there was something left undone, a chapter not yet closed. This time, Eli approached the house not with fear but a solemn curiosity. The mansion stood as he remembered, imposing and silent, but as he stepped through the rusted gates, a subtle change in the atmosphere was palpable. The oppressive weight that once hovered over the place had lifted, yet a gentle sadness seemed to linger in the air, like the echo of a long-forgotten cry. As he walked through the now familiar rooms, Eli noticed small changes. Where once there had been dust and decay, there were now signs of restoration. It seemed as though the house itself was healing, its walls less somber, the air clearer. He made his way to the grand ballroom, half expecting to hear the phantom piano, but there was only silence. In the center of the room, where the ritual had taken place, lay a single white rose, its petals fresh, as if just placed there. Eli picked it up, pondering its significance. Could it be a thank you from the Hawthorns, a symbol of peace? Or was it something more, a sign that the house still held secrets yet to be uncovered? With the rose in hand, Eli felt a sudden urge to explore the upper floors of the mansion, areas he had previously avoided, compelled by an instinct that there was something more to be found. The upper hallways were lined with closed doors, each one whispering hints of untold stories. Opening one, Eli discovered a small library filled with books that seemed untouched by time. Dust motes danced in the beams of sunlight filtering through the windows, casting patterns on the floor. On a desk lay an open journal, its pages yellowed but the writing still legible. It belonged to the last master of the house, detailing accounts of life in the mansion, including references to the eternal guests and a final unfinished entry about a hidden room that housed the heart of the house. Intrigued, Eli read further, piecing together clues from the journal that led him to a concealed door behind a bookshelf. With a mix of excitement and trepidation, he pushed it open, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling downwards. At the bottom, he found a small chamber, its walls lined with ancient runes, and the air thick with the scent of roses. In the center stood an altar, upon which lay another white rose, identical to the one he had found upstairs. Surrounding the altar were portraits of the Hawthorn family, their faces serene, watching over the room. As Eli approached the altar, the room seemed to hum with a soft energy, comforting yet powerful. He realized then that this chamber was the spiritual heart of the house, a sacred place where the Hawthorns had practiced rites to protect and bless their home. It was here that the true magic of the house resided, not in darkness but in light. Feeling a profound connection to the house and its history, Eli decided to take up the responsibility of caretaker, preserving the legacy of the Hawthorn family and maintaining the sanctity of the chamber. The Hollow House was no longer a place of hauntings and horror, but a beacon of peace and history, a testament to the power of redemption and the enduring strength of the human spirit. And so,
Eli's bond with the Hollow House was sealed, not through fear or spectral encounters, but through understanding and respect for the past, forever guarding its secrets and stories. The house in return stood silent and proud, a timeless guardian watching over the land and its unlikely keeper.
Years passed, and under Eli's careful stewardship, Hollow House transformed. No longer was it a symbol of fear in the community, but rather a place of intrigue and historical significance. Eli opened parts of the house to the public, giving tours that detailed its rich history and the night of the ritual that freed the Hawthorne spirits. He spoke of the house not as haunted, but as enchanted, a site where the boundary between the earthly and the ethereal was thin. Eli also dedicated himself to studying the runes and texts found in the hidden chamber. He learned they were protective charms and blessings, designed to shield the house and its inhabitants from darker forces and to bind the Hawthorne family to their beloved home as guardians rather than prisoners. Over time, Eli added his own protections, blending tradition with his personal touch, ensuring the house would remain a safe haven for all who visited. The library became his sanctuary, where he documented his findings and thoughts in a series of journals that mirrored those left by the previous masters of the house. He became something of a local scholar, respected for his knowledge of supernatural lore and the occult history of the region. One autumn evening, during the anniversary of his first foray into the house, Eli decided to host a special event at Hollow House. He invited historians, paranormal enthusiasts, and curious locals to a night of storytelling and remembrance. The guests gathered in the grand ballroom, lit by candles that cast soft shadows against the walls, creating an atmosphere that was both eerie and beautiful. As the clock struck midnight, the air filled with the faint sound of piano music. The guests looked around in surprise, but Eli smiled, knowing the music was not a sign of haunting, but an echo of the house's storied past, a remnant of its soul. He explained to the gathered crowd how the music was a sign of the Hawthorne family's enduring presence, not as tormented spirits, but as peaceful protectors of the house. The event was a success, sparking even more interest in the mysteries of Hollow House. People left feeling a sense of wonder, and the stories of the house's hauntings transformed into tales of its magic and mystique. Eli continued to live in the house, taking care of it as both a guardian and a friend. He often wandered through the rooms, talking to the house as one would an old friend, sharing his thoughts, and listening to the soft whispers of the wind through the corridors. As he grew older, Eli prepared to pass on his role to another keeper. He chose carefully, looking for someone with respect for the history and a sensitivity to the spiritual energies of the house. When he found the right person, a young woman with a keen interest in the paranormal and a respectful approach to preservation, Eli trained her in the ways of the house, teaching her the meanings of the runes and the importance of the rituals he had upheld. When the time came for him to leave, Eli felt a profound peace, knowing that Hollow House was in capable hands. He left the house for the last time with a glance back at the grand facade, seeing not a haunted mansion, but a beacon of continuity, mystery, and history intertwined. Hollow House stands still on the outskirts of that forgotten town, its story ever evolving. It remains a place where the past and present meet, where the lines between the spiritual and the temporal blur, and where every visitor leaves with a sense of having touched something truly extraordinary. As the young woman took over the stewardship of Hollow House, the atmosphere began to subtly shift. What had been a serene, almost sacred site under Eli's care slowly reverted, whispering hints of its darker past. The new keeper, fascinated by the lore and eager to delve deeper, began to experiment with the ancient texts and rituals found in the hidden chamber, unaware of the delicate balance Eli had maintained. One crisp autumn night, she decided to recreate one of the more obscure rites described in the journals, believing it would further strengthen her bond with the house. The ritual required the alignment of the moon and the lighting of 7 black candles, arranged in a specific pattern around the house's altar. The texts hinted at a power to see through the veils of time and space, to summon the true essence of Hollow House. As she chanted the incantations, the walls of the house seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Shadows lengthened, stretching across the walls like dark fingers. The wind rose, howling through the corridors, as if the house itself was protesting her actions. Ignoring these signs, she continued, driven by a desire to unlock the house's secrets. At the ritual's peak, the ground trembled, and a deep, resonant groan echoed through the house, emanating from its very foundations. The candles flared wildly, casting eerie, dancing lights across the room. Then, the unexpected happened. The air in the center of the circle shimmered, and a rift opened, a dark, gaping maw that seemed to lead into an abyss. From this void, figures began to emerge, not the peaceful Hawthorne spirits, but tormented souls, twisted and gnarled by their suffering. They were the lost ones, souls who had stumbled upon the house over the centuries and had been consumed by its darker nature. Their faces were contorted in agony, their eyes empty of anything but pain and malice. The young woman tried to close the rift, repeating reversal spells, but the darkness only grew, fed by her fear. The figures surrounded her, their whispers now loud and demanding, pulling at her spirit. She realized too late that she had not summoned the house's protective spirits, but had instead unlocked the deeper, more malevolent forces trapped within its walls. As the spirits closed in, the last of the candles flickered out, plunging the room into darkness. When the moonlight finally crept back through the windows, the young woman was nowhere to be seen. The house had claimed her, another soul added to its ancient depths. The Hollow House stood silent once more, its darkened windows like watching eyes. The townsfolk spoke in hushed tones about the night the lights had flickered and the ground had shaken. The house was shunned again, left to brood over its newly regained power. As years passed, the legend of the Hollow House grew once more into a tale of horror. Whispers of the lost keeper and the souls she had unleashed became a new chapter in the house's cursed history. The mansion waited, patient and eternal, its doors closed, its secrets hidden within. A beacon, not of peace, but of warning to those who would dare to unlock the true horrors that lay in the heart of Hollow House.